Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us Dave Swartz. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate being here.
Awesome. You have a campaign on right now. But before we get into that, I would love for you to give our viewers a brief introduction about yourself. As a comic writer and artist, and what got you interested into comics?
Sure. Again, my name is Dave Swartz. I've been doing comics for 10 years now. Um, I mean, I've always been an artist. I grew up with comics, as many of us did back in the '90s. Um, I just really enjoyed when I was little, just going to the comic book store, grabbing my favorite, looking cover, finding the big splash page inside, and then just trying my best to draw that splash page as closely to what the original artist had done as possible. And so that's kind of how I got my start. And I went through a lot of different phases in my artistic career, but I eventually wound up back at comics. So I decided when I wanted to make the transition from more of a corporate design job to doing comics full time, that I wanted to write as well. So I spent some time, kind of practicing writing and getting familiar with how to construct a story.
Hmm.
And so when I first started out, I wanted to be a self-publisher of my own books, like I think a lot of us do. But I think it was pretty quickly early on that I decided, well, I don't know if this is going to be able to pay my bills. So I decided to kind of make that transition into being a full-time artist for other projects, and I've been doing that for close to 4 years now, I think. I think
Wow.
2020 was the period in which I began this series that we're here to talk about, Confederate Monster. Um,
Yeah.
and I did that it was like my COVID project, but I only got about halfway through. And so I decided, I have time now. I've kind of allowed for things to kind of settle in my life. So I'm back at it, finishing up Confederate Monster, and we're in issue 5 of 6. So we only have one more issue to go, which I'm super excited about finishing it up.
Pretty exciting because this is the issue where things escalate, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah. We've kind of been just ramping up the last couple of issues, introducing the characters where they've been, because after all, this is a sort of reimagining of the Frankenstein story. So I set it 8 years after the original, so all these characters are a bit more, advanced, or they've been doing a lot of different things ever since the original monster was brought back to life. So, Victor has been in an insane asylum. So when we first meet Victor, he's just absolutely bonkers, like biting the heads off of rats and just rambling in sort of limericks. And but then my main character, Igor, he's been hiding out in Confederate Virginia for the last 8 years, just sort of rebuilding his life, and has established himself as a reconstructive surgeon for soldiers who are coming back from war with amputations. Um,
yeah.
Confederacy finds out about his past and kidnap him and convince him to recreate the reanimation process so that they can reanimate their entire dead army.
That's amazing. That's a brilliant plot to the story, to be honest. Like I think I backed the previous one, but like I'm really excited about getting the story arc, like yeah, definitely going to collect all 6 issues when they come out. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about getting to number 6. Really, I mean, I think
Yeah.
all writers, creators, we're excited about the climax, the big kind of ending. So yeah, I'm really excited about 6. And the nice thing about 6, or at least I say the cool thing about 6, is that it's going to be a double issue, just like issue 1. So if you've got issue 1, you know that issue 1 is a beefy comic. But
Mm.
if you haven't gotten any of these books yet, just know the first issue is 40 pages. And I'm doing the same with the last. And in my mind, I sort of wanted to approach this arc similar
Mm.
to the way that many TV shows are constructed now, where they release like the first 2 episodes to kind of get you hooked. But then maybe there's like a big, longer kind of season finale or series finale at the end. So that's kind of where that inspiration came from.
Mm.
Um, to really, again, hook audiences in the beginning with a long issue and then really make the ending feel a little longer so that they feel like, oh, it's not just quick and done and it's over. I wanted to make the
Mm.
ending feel just a little longer because we know sometimes reading comics goes by real quick. So,
Yes, that's a common complaint that people have. Especially with indie comics. I think like uh, because you have to wait so long for the next issue to be created, and like there's a campaign and this whole period of like finishing the book itself. um so yeah, that's fantastic, by the way, what you're doing for issue 6, because then you can read the whole like ending as is in one go, and 40 pages is definitely good value for money as well, when you're investing that time and investing yourself into the story. I think it's great value that way as well.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
That gives, when I first saw this, it just gave me Reanimator vibes. That whole page spread. So great that you mentioned Reanimator. Uh, but I would question from my side, like obviously that's one of the influences, but are there any like influences from pop culture that you would tell people as reference points for the story or the comic in general? You're like Confederate Monster.
I mean, I say there's like a little section at the top that kind of tells you like if you're a fan of this you
Yeah.
this book, right? So like one of the things I put down there is like the old Hammer films, because I feel like if this were to be adapted into a film or a TV series, I mean I would 100% be in the realm of let's stylize this to look like a Hammer film,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I feel like there's a lot of the way in which I approach the art that's inspired by that, whether or not it was conscious or not.
Mm.
When I first started, I went through and I watched a lot of Frankenstein, movies and other, television shows, things that were, featuring the character in some way so that I could kind of pick and choose little things that I could add in there that if someone's a fan of Frankenstein, they would go like, oh, like that's from whatever, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
so I did a little bit of that, and maybe some of that seeped into my subconscious, and it came out in the way I approached the art. But after I
Yeah.
looked at it, I was like, yeah, like I could definitely see this as very Hammer film kind of inspired. Um, but then also like the Penny Dreadful series was a big inspiration for me. Just sort of this like dark and gloomy, kind of approach, very kind of period, muted sort of color schemes and things like that.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I really wanted to, like I was saying before, take little bits and pieces from other Frankenstein uh, projects or
Yeah.
properties, and sort of try to put that in there at least a little bit here and there. Like there's one example is at the end of issue 3, I do a
Hmm.
very quick shot of a Confederate scientist who's sort of like alluded to be like their their top guy who was trying to do this but just couldn't do it. So that's why they
Hmm.
needed to bring these other experts in, kind of thing. And I kind of designed him to sort of look a little like the inspector from Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He kind of has like the one eye patchy kind of eye, and that kind of thing, and that
Yeah.
mustache. So little things like that, which I think helps if you're a Frankenstein fan, to really kind of immerse you within that whole field, I suppose.
That's very true. Yeah, that's fantastic. There's also like I think this is like a few years ago there were this like studio movies about like X setting with Western like cowboys and aliens and
Right.
like um
Abraham
so
Lincoln
there's this
here.
yeah exactly there was there's this movie I actually watched which I don't know if we talked about it previously or not, but there was this movie called Bone Tomahawk. I don't know if you've watched it.
No, I haven't.
um it's a horror zombie movie set in Western times, so it has some parallels that way. But J.D. Salazar is such a fantastic director. Like he just elevates that material from like a studio note to like a really like deep story about like human relationships. It's about like it's like it's a road movie where like these characters are in a situation that they didn't really expect, and like they're doing the journey through the desert, and then they're stuck in the zombie situation, and they have no idea how to go about it because it's Western times. They have no knowledge of these things, So, um, yeah, it's a good crazy movie. It's really good, and very gory as well.
That's something I'm definitely bringing into issue 5. I mean, I've hit on it a few times in the last couple of issues, but this one in particular, there's I mean, obviously you showed the dismemberment kind of scene there. That's more or less a dream sequence, but it's inspired by real events that happened in the story.
Mm,
And I have a page that I just loaded up onto my social media. It's not on the campaign, but it's a ink version. I haven't gotten around to coloring it, but
mm,
it's a big battle scene, just super gruesome. If you really look through it, you can see all kinds of just interesting things happening there. There's a guy in the background just biting the face off of a Union soldier.
yeah.
So this issue in particular, I really get a chance to dive into some gruesome imagery and some very cool artwork. And the aforementioned President Lincoln makes an appearance in this issue. So
Yeah, because why not, right? That's yeah.
gotta throw
Yeah,
something to draw. I mean, I just want to draw Lincoln.
yeah. Amazing, amazing. Also, like I think setting in Civil War gives you like a lot of opportunity to explore like some of these like gruesome elements, like like horrors of war, and like that kind of aspect to the story as well. So I think it's a fantastic setting. I know it's been used for hundreds of other things, but like this setting and this story feels very unique, like the way you have married them together.
Well, thank you. One of the things you were just kind of touching on there a bit that really told me that there was some good synergy here was, when I was researching the Civil War, one of the big facts that jumped out at me was, this was a period in our history that began the, more commonly understood practice of amputation. So
Hmm.
and doing it in a pretty gruesome way on the battlefield.
Wow.
So the parallels of chopping body parts off and having to maybe put them back together with this prosthetic, which was also a new technology at the time. I thought was just very, interesting to bring into the world of Frankenstein. And that's why I chose to make my main character, Igor, pose as a reconstructive surgeon, with um, a experienced knowledge of how to
Mm.
create a prosthetic limb for these soldiers. So he's not only a prestigious doctor, but he's also somebody doing something very new and exciting, and that kind of thing. So
That's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant connection because yeah, Frankenstein's story deals with some of these things, and just extending that to like actual things that happened during that period is, yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
yeah, I
Amazing.
try to keep it very close to the historical accuracy. However, obviously, I take artistic liberties. So but there's accurate generals that I use. Two of the main villains are Stonewall Jackson and Bedford Forrest. And those guys in real life were not great. I mean, Bedford Forrest was the first Grand Master to the KKK. So
Mm.
I wanted to make them true villains. In my story, not only because they were actual villains, but they look like villains. I mean, I don't know if anybody's actually seen a picture of these guys, but they look menacing. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think that's also like I feel like basing somebody. I remember like like for example, Inglorious Bastards, like based on like a real villain, like
right,
from real life, and just like either like making a farce out of it, like just killing him in such a gruesome way. It's so fantastical and like farcical, to the point like he's like we will not you'll probably laugh at him rather than feel anything about that person. Also, like just I would say like because these villains are larger than life, in real life,
right.
and like just bringing them down to a level and like and saying like they don't deserve your attention.
Yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
making them out to be, the villain that they really were,
yeah,
because a lot of people, I think still to this day, sort of think of a lot of these guys as well. They were only trying to, do the thing that was gonna, you know, keep their worldview alive, and
yeah,
it's like, yeah, but their worldview is a little screwed, so. Um, it makes sense to make them into the villain. And
yeah.
honestly, I think it would have been a little um, almost like I was missing something if I didn't put like real, you know, historical figures in the book because it is a
Mm,
historical piece.
yeah.
And it would, to me, feel like it would be more genuine and grounded in that way.
That brings me to the next question. I would say like what was your research behind it? Like how did you go about researching for the book?
I mean, it was a combination of researching for the writing as well as researching for the art. So,
Mm,
because I'm doing both. So, when I'm researching the writing, I'm trying to understand not only the timeline of that period, but also the characters involved, right? The people, like we were just discussing. Who can I use? Who can I not use? How can I, or do I have a need for a certain character in the book, and can I find somebody that actually lived that could fill that need? One of the things, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He's very briefly sort of not featured in the book, but he's there. They at least talk about him. So my Igor character is married to this well-to-do senator's daughter, and I don't really necessarily name the senator, but there was a senator in Virginia that was against the Confederacy, and so that would make sense that that was her father, because of the fact that they have views that would go against most people living in that time period. Because
mm,
there's a scene in the first issue where Igor, but I refer to him as Daniel in the book.
mm,
That's his sort of covert name. So Daniel and his wife Elizabeth, they're having this huge argument about being in Virginia and Daniel's desire to move up north. But she has lived there all her life. She doesn't want to move. She, in ways, sort of promised her father that she would, continue his legacy.
Mm.
So, there was things like that that I felt were important as the writer side of me, to try to find historical things that would fill those, character needs. Now from an artistic standpoint, I looked at not only the imagery of the war that was available, because there are some photographs that you can find online, but also, some of the more esoteric stuff. So there's one of the scenes in the issue 0 is what I like to call the prequel issue, which basically tells the story of how we get from the original Frankenstein story, where they reanimated the original monster, to how they, set up the story for where we start in issue 1. And there's a quick shot of Victor brandishing a 10-barrel handgun. And that was an actual thing that I found that was related to the Civil War. Now, I'm not entirely
Wow.
sure if it was something that was used, but it was at least a concept weapon that they developed
Mm.
during the Civil War. And I found that there's an array of just interesting conceptual weapons that were built at that time that maybe weren't
Yeah.
widely used, um, but nevertheless inspired the artist in me to go like, oh man, this is interesting. I got to use this. So it's like, it's historically accurate ish.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. No, I think like even if you're writing a fantasy book, just creating something more historically accurate like uh, makes it a much more immersive experience because people are usually familiar with these real world things, and it just grounds the book a little bit in reality, immerses people a little bit more, and sometimes fantasy and like these settings, like they do, like people do things that take people out of the story, but I feel like this does the opposite. It just helps people get into the story a little bit more. So
Sure. Well, and one of the things too, this is a little off the historical, topic, but one of the things that I wanted to do with this one is I wanted to sort of update, or at least lend a different perspective to how the reanimation process would work.
yeah.
Because after all, I think when the story was first created, electricity was good enough. People didn't really quite understand the minutia of science. So I think it was plausible for many. But then, obviously, as technology advanced and most culture advanced in their perception of science, I think we all kind of understand that it's a little bit more complicated than just
Yep.
shooting electricity through the body, right? Um, so one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of update that a little. And so one of the things I added to the reanimation process, it's sort of my secret ingredient, is DMT. So
Mm.
I wanted to, say, hey, it's not just about, reanimating the body. It's also about kind of reconnecting the spirit side of things back into, or the soul side of things back into the body. And
Nice.
DMT is for those who don't know, one of the most powerful hallucinogenics on the planet. And in
Mm.
that state, you kind of blur the lines between reality and fantasy. And so, in my opinion, I thought it would be interesting if maybe the monster, or these reanimated soldiers, their brains were injected with an intense amount of DMT right before they were shocked back to life. To me, I felt like, wow, that could be a little bit more plausible, and fit a
Yeah.
little bit more of what we now know about the mind and how it works. And then in the same vein, one of the other aspects of it was, I stipulated that when the body is reanimated, that
Mm.
the mind is broken. Like it's rabid and just almost like animalistic tendencies are the only thing that is operating. So, one of the things that I came up with as well to help with, bringing sanity back to the mind, that's
Mm.
been animated, is psychedelic mushrooms, because psychedelic mushrooms are known as a neural connector. They can reconnect neural pathways that were maybe once broken.
Mm.
So in the preview issue or preview pages that you see there, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see that there's a page there where I'm featuring a psychedelic. Up.
Oh,
Sorry,
this one.
yeah, right there. That little. It's supposed to be like a psychedelic sort of vision that the my
Ah,
version of the bride there is having, as she's under the influence of the mushrooms as they are
yeah,
reconnecting her neural pathways.
yeah,
So again, in that way, I was really hoping that I could bring something fresh and new and interesting for their
yeah.
audiences to kind of mull over as they're reading the book.
Yeah, I was about to say, and you mentioned that really well, was like it does give you a bit of room to explore some crazy visuals that go along with, hallucinogens and, like someone being in that state. Yeah, just adds a bit of like good story element to it, plus like amazing visuals as well.
Right.
Um,
Right. That like psychedelic horror, kind of thing. Like I really dug on that. So
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Awesome. I like I would get the next thing I would try to get into is like I know we talked a bit about your like favorite pop culture stuff. Like do you I would say this time we'll do it slightly differently and say what's your top three genres of say movies or books or whatever that is? And can you tell us like maybe your like favorite like say book or movie in that genre, like a comic or book or movie.
sure. Okay. So man, I think as much as I am a huge, I mean, as much as I'm a huge horror fan, because I really
Yep.
am, I would say that like sci-fi beats out horror just ever so slightly. Only because I feel like there's a little bit more like that you can chew on with sci-fi. And maybe I'm wrong with that, but at least from my perspective, I just feel like the possibilities of what you can do in the sci-fi genre is just a bit more expansive. Um, as far as my favorite sci-fi property, um, man, I mean, it is difficult to pick one.
It is very
Um,
difficult. Yeah.
yeah, it is. But I, I think maybe more generally, I would say I'm really into anything that's like space exploration. I'll say that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
really enjoy, being on other planets, interacting with aliens. I mean, probably Star Wars is like fitting that bill pretty well.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many other properties out there that I feel like play in that genre really well. That really kind of give you a sense of otherworldly environments and
Mm.
worlds to explore. Um, you know, as far as my second one, I would say definitely horror right after. I mean, sci-fi and horror like neck and neck for me. I mean, my last book was a sci-fi book before Confederate Monster. Now I'm in horror. So as far as horror goes, I mean, I'm obviously like a huge Frankenstein fan. Like literally anything Frankenstein, I'm gonna jump all over. But I'm
Yeah.
also really into like the werewolf genre. I like vampire stuff, but it's just I don't know. I feel like it's a little overdone in a lot of ways.
Mm. Mm.
I think that's actually part of the reason why I gear more towards Frankenstein because it's just I feel like and why I did the book because I feel like there
Yeah.
needs to be more, like
Yeah.
more reimaginings and retellings and just trying it in a different way. I feel like even werewolves to a certain degree have a bit more going on, in their genre, um,
Yeah.
or their neck of the woods, so to speak. Um,
Speaking of vampires, like I think obviously it's not fresh anymore, but like when it originally came out, like something like What We Do in the Shadows was
oh
so
yeah,
widely original because like
yeah,
it
I
was
love
just
that.
such a fresh take on the whole vampire thing. Like, it was just so fun. Yeah.
It's funny because I've never actually watched the original movie, but I've seen the entire TV series. And I'm in dying actually to watch the original movie. I've seen clips here and there, and I'm sure it's fantastic, you know.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, that's like you said, that's a great example of taking something that everybody's familiar with and just reimagining it in a way that we're not familiar with.
yeah, yeah.
You know, but I would say my third, um, probably probably historical stuff. I mean, I know I'm like kind of just
Mm.
talking about my own stuff here, but like, I really like history. There's something about like the old world period pieces, things like that. You know, one of the properties I just watched recently was the first season of The Terror. That was on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that or not. Um, it's fantastic. It really is.
Mm.
It's sort of like it's a period piece. It's about like a crew, a crew of explorers that are trying to find the Northern Passage, and so they're tasked with basically going up into the Arctic and going through the ice. Trying to find a pathway through the ice to the other continent, and they encounter a otherworldly beast hunting them, and it's just
Wow.
fantastic. I mean, like the quality of it being on an enclosed ship,
Yeah.
all these intense emotions and rivalries and things that erupt, and just the quality of the supernatural element is not overdone. I feel like it's just enough to keep it in that place of like, wait, is this real or is this like supernatural? And it
Yeah.
does play that line really well.
Yeah. 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 That's fantastic. No, thanks for that. I love to put people on the spot and ask them such questions, but I think you did pretty well. But yeah, and obviously, like you did mention that these are things that you have been talking about, but like if they are your like top three, like say things to go to, you draw a lot from them. Like even in your work, uh, like not just as an influence, but also like how you set it up and maybe the tropes that you use in the story, or even like the environment and you create in the story as well. Like it all comes from your love for some of these things. So yeah, you always draw from that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
um, Amazing. So what are the plans after this, for you? Like, are you going to keep working on a similar story arc? Like, is the whole like first arc finished at six? Do you have any further plan for Confederate Monsters, or like do you have any other stories you're
Yeah,
going to work on?
I always have more stories that I want to explore. I have one story in the back of my mind that I've been really hoping that one day I could be able to attempt. It's sort of like a fantasy type story, but it's got some superhero elements to it. Well, I would say it's more mythical, almost like a Greek kind of story.
Mm,
So I have that. I'm not entirely sure if I'll do that next, but I do have a pretty interesting approach to how I would want to continue Confederate Monster, because I think that there is, a couple people have been asking me, do other Universal monsters show up like werewolf and Dracula and Mummy and I one of the things I was thinking about as far as like an approach to continuing a Confederate Monster is
mm,
doing another story that's set in the same kind of world, but we move to a different monster. So say like werewolf could be next, but my version of these monsters would be more based off of American sort of folklore,
mm,
like Native American. So, like for the werewolf, I would do like a skinwalker for
right.
that. So it would be a little bit more, rooted in American, like I said, myth. And in that way, kind of, approach the genre just a little bit different than you might expect.
Yeah.
Um, and do another 6 issues of that, and then do another 6 on another monster.
Mm.
One of the other ideas I had for it was like doing like a Creature of the Black Lagoon, but maybe it's like a voodoo kind of thing in Louisiana or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
So yeah, I do have plenty of different approaches to how I could continue
yeah,
this world, so to
yeah.
speak. Because I think that there's some interesting things that I could bring to the table.
That's fantastic. No, I think it's always good, especially like I think if you've created already like did enough world building, there's obviously scope to explore more stories and side quests and spin-offs as we love to call
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah. And then maybe one day they can all die together,
Who
into
knows? Who knows?
who
Yeah.
knows.
It
Yeah.
took a while to just get this one to be made, so I'm sure it'll be a while before I get there. But I mean, it's not impossible. I think of any book that I have worked on or developed myself. I do feel like this one has more potential to
Mm,
not only expand but also to potentially even be picked up by another type of property. I could see it as a
mm,
television show. I could see it as a movie. Um, Probably more of a television show because it's a little bit more long form. But um,
yeah.
I feel like this one definitely has some audience appeal.
Yeah, definitely. I think you briefly touched upon that as well, like for the first four issues, and one of which like was a double issue. You've introduced those characters and got the basic plot going and like let them sit well in the story.
Yep.
And I think like that's really good for like maybe starting a TV show because like especially in this day and age when you have like say limited series of like 6 episodes or 8 episodes
Right.
where they give like characters enough time to be there and grow and you learn more about the world slowly and
Right.
I think the story is pretty good for something like that. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, we're coming close to time, but all the best for your campaign, and I would love to give you this the stage one more time to do an elevator pitch of the book, and why should people back your campaign?
Sure.
Take
So
it away.
I mean, in a nutshell, Confederate Monster is basically a cowboy Frankenstein versus undead Confederates army. It's just got a ton of really great, gruesome historical horror. We are reimagining characters from the Frankenstein world in ways that you're not familiar with. So it's nice and fresh and interesting. We are again also exploring different aspects of the horror genre by introducing these sort of psychedelic dream-like sequences that again bring a sense of newness to the genre as a whole. Not to mention that in this current issue that is on Kickstarter, I feel like it is chock full of some of the better art that I have been doing for the series thus far. Just in the first, I would say, 4 or 5 pages, it's just a lot more going on. And like we were talking about earlier, the conflict is really ramping up. We're in the battles, we're in a race against time. So the action's really ramping up, and we only got one more issue to go after this. So I feel like if you haven't jumped on the story yet, this is a good time to jump in for sure. And we got some pretty cool catch up tiers. We got a digital catch up tier that's actually priced, I think, pretty reasonably for the amount of books that you're getting. Because I think all totaled, including the prequel issue, it's 6 books. And then there's I think we were all sold out just recently of the physical catch up sale. Um,
Wow.
Again, it's one of those series that I feel like has a sense of freshness and newness to a genre or at least a property that has been around for a long, long time. So
Fantastic, fantastic. And like, yeah, the art is fantastic. The story is super interesting. Please back this comic, and let's bring it to life. Thank you for coming on the show, Dave. Really appreciate your time today.
thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the talk and the opportunity to speak about my work.
Awesome. Until next time, stay gold, everyone. See ya.